And that is one of the fallacies around a number of these things, and also looking at macroeconomic statistics without understanding the underlying causalities, or in simple terms, the difference between correlation and causality. Right? And of course, there is an issue about how you mindset with the firm as an owner or a custodian, which comes with timelines, and something about how you use profits. You know, the profits in the left-hand side tend to go into my pocket. And by the way, most of my assets in terms of buildings that I sit in sits in my wife's name, whereas on the right-hand side, I reinvest it. And we use policy tools for those too. One of the most successful policy tools to de-risk SMEs in Sweden has been a tax policy, which says that if you are the owner and you take out some money, you have two choices in the extreme. You can take out very little and reinvest a lot to reduce the debt of the firm, or you can, in theory, take up more debt as a firm, hand it out to me, the owner, one way or another, and I buy a new Ferrari. Right? In the left, I get more of my salary tax-free, depending on how much I reduce the debt. And on the right, I double my tax on my salary. Right? In other words, there is a tax policy that encourages taking away debt from the firm, which means de-risking the firms, which means survival rate goes up. And you will find, for example, Sweden has a lower startup ratio than many other countries in new firms, but the success rate of startups are extremely high. So the net effect is we have a very large growth of new firms, but it's not based on huge number of startups where many fails. It's based on a relatively low number of startups where almost everything succeeds. Productivity is key. We can never get away from that. Productivity is fundamental, but you want two things. You want both productivity increase and labor utilization increase, right? That's what you want. You want people to have gainful employment while you are competitive and increase your productivity. And I will just direct you, these are OECD numbers, I'll just direct you to the 2009-2010 numbers, which are interesting. If you look then, for example, in the productivity issue in the middle, you can compare the second line, or the two first one, which is Finland and Sweden, with the third line, which is Australia, which you can see there is no improvement. None. And if you look at the last 10 years, you basically get no improvement either. Right? So Australian productivity improvement has been extremely poor over the last decade. That is just not possible in a high-cost environment. In a high-cost environment, you have to increase productivity more than anybody else. That follows from being a high-cost environment. And then that has to lead to local industrial growth, which means you need a higher labor utilization as well. So these are critical issues. And the proof of the pudding is your ability to sell things that are expensive. That's the proof of the pudding. The OECD tends to use a measure which basically divides your export as a country into three groups. Things that are more than 30% more expensive than what you can buy elsewhere on a comparable type of goods. Things that are roughly similarly priced, and things that are kind of priced more than 30% cheaper than goods you can buy elsewhere. And I'm just pointing out, again, I happen to have the numbers for Sweden handy for obvious reasons. The Swedish exports were distributed 40% for a high-priced goods. So 40% of what the country of Sweden exports is priced more than 30% more expensive than things you can buy providing the same services and solutions from elsewhere. 50% is comparatively priced, and 10% is cheaper, mostly logs, okay, and pieces of wood, right, things like that. And that hasn't really changed. But if you look at the change, you can see the country is constantly upping the share of goods it sells, which is expensive. And that's the same for Germany. It's the same for Switzerland. It's the same for Finland. If I look at the Australian numbers, they are basically flip-flopped. And that is because you come from a low-cost environment where you sell on price. But that environment has gone away. So you can't do this any longer. So what do we know around these type of firms that do this? What characteristics do they have? And we do know quite a lot around them. We know, and I'll go through quickly, I'm talking about SMEs now. I'm not talking about the Ericssons of this world. I'm talking about the SMEs. What we do know is that they have an incredible depth of knowledge in their domain. If they bend metal, they know no more about metal bending than anybody else. They know exactly how to do it. They know the metallurgical properties. They know the machine issues. They know more than anybody else the knowledge that is required to underpin the business. They have an incredible depth of knowledge. I won't take it in circular order. I'll jump around a bit. They have an incredible focus. You know, if you go to these firms and ask them what they do, you get answers like, we produce unique glues to fasten metal components in gearboxes or wind generators. You know? It's an incredibly focused business. They are very, very narrowly focused. But they serve that industry totally globally. So they sell things across the world. They have internally employees that are knowledgeable, that are loyal, that are very educated and have a very low turnover. They go together. And I'll talk a little bit about education later on. But the average turnover of employees in these type of firms in that manufacturing belt is 3.7%. Now you do your maths on that. That means they stay close to 30 years in the firm. The equivalent number in the US is 30%, which means they stay about 3 years. You imagine how much difference in knowledge you can acquire if you also continuously educate it. And one of the things that characterize these firms is they spend a lot of money on continuously training their employees, long time, every year. And let me illustrate why that is important. And I'll take an example from a large firm just to illustrate that. In the large global manufacturers that happen to be high-tech manufacturers, you know, they tend to hire engineers out of university, and when they get them, they are fresh, they're recently up to date, they know their knowledge ratio. If they invest in their training 3 months a year, right? So they send them on training 3 months a year paid in order to keep their knowledge up to date. How long do you think their knowledge can be maintained up to date with the edge knowledge that the firm operates on? The answer is around 3 years. So after 3 years, these people are out of date no matter what, right? So that means you have to have a different way of using people, because we don't want to get rid of them. They have knowledge. So what some companies have done is they have put them in and say, you start your career in R&D, you work with developing a new product generation, and then you follow that into prototyping, then you follow it into manufacturing because you understand it, and now you work with how to manufacture it, then you follow it into installation, and then follow it into after service and maintenance because you know about it. So what it does is it locks you into kind of a technology generation, and there you can create value for the firms. And some of these guys have, I mean, most of these products that these type of firms sell last forever, you know, be that a large truck from Scania, or be that a set of roller bearings from SKF, or be that an infrastructure telecommunication system from Ericsson. You know, they have 20 years lifespan, these things. So you can follow them like that. But it means that, you know, this ability to stay on top of the game is critical. And yes, you need to train people, but even if you train them a lot, it just isn't enough to keep them there forever. Then there is something around, of course, offering very good products and services, and all these firms offer product service systems, and some even offer solutions, and that's, I'm not going into the distinction between those two. But the product service system, and is this important? Most services in the places we come from are provided by manufacturing firms, which is why we say service economy is an idiotic statement. And the reason is that 60% plus of all services are produced either by manufacturing firms or on behalf of manufacturing firms. And out of the remaining third, 10% is high value services like accounting, consultancy, investment banking, for whom most of the customers are manufacturing firms. That means if you kill manufacturing, you kill services. You know, you can't have an economy without manufacturing, and you can see it on the micro level. If you go to a town where they had a very successful manufacturing firm surrounded by a lot of services, and then manufacturing firm dies, that means that the services should survive nicely, don't it? Because we can live without manufacturing in a service economy. No? Of course they don't. They die. There's nobody there to maintain the economic activity for them. So these are inseparable, right? So all these firms offer product service systems. They offer services. And some of them are classified as service companies. I'll give you a simple example. Ericsson as a firm has 98,000 employees. Let me give you the quick distribution. 22,000 is R&D. 50,000 is services and solutions. 26,000 is administration and manufacturing. So by definition, it's a service company. Right? It's just that if you kill manufacturing, there will be no service and there will be no company.